Welcome to Emovura Audiobooks channel. This is playlist of Emovura Crime Files, Rewind, where every story starts at the end. Tonight's story is called The Last Reservation. Get comfortable. Here's where it ends. The end. The fire took 11 minutes to reach the roof of Marchetti's. Daniel Cho stood across the street in a pressed navy suit, watching the windows of his own restaurant blow out one by one, and he did not flinch. Behind him, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, phones raised, filming the flames climb the brick face his father had repointed by hand 2 decades earlier. Somewhere in that crowd were the 3 reporters Daniel had personally invited for tonight's grand reopening. They had come for a ribbon cutting and a glass of the good Barolo. They were filming this instead. A chef in a suit too clean for a man who had supposedly just run out of a burning building. His tie still knotted, his shoes without a speck of ash on them, his hands, when a paramedic reached for them out of habit, completely unmarked. Investigator Marin noticed it before anyone else did. She'd worked 11 structure fires that year, and every single survivor she'd ever pulled off a sidewalk had looked wrecked. Soot in the creases of their knuckles, throat raw, eyes red from smoke that doesn't care whether you're a chef or a stranger. Daniel Cho looked like a man watching a movie. She walked past the hoses, past the ladder crew, shouting numbers to each other, straight up to him, and studied his face in the orange light for a long moment before she spoke. "Mr. Cho," she said, "where exactly were you standing when the fire started?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. 40 minutes earlier, in a utility closet 2 floors below where they now stood, she'd found a sprinkler valve, shut off, and tagged with a yellow maintenance sticker, dated for a service call, that, according to the building's own service log, had never been scheduled. "Daniel Cho," she said, "you're under arrest." Hours earlier, 6 hours before the fire, Daniel had walked the empty dining room alone, running his palm along the same oak bar his father had installed 31 years earlier, worn smooth in the same 3 places by 3 decades of elbows and regret. The reopening banner was already hung outside. The good tablecloths were already pressed. He told the staff to go home early. "Deep clean before the press comes," he said. And nobody questioned it. Because why would they question the man whose name was on the lease and whose father's photograph hung by the register? He called the contractor one last time, standing by the wine cellar door, voice pitched low even though the dining room was empty. "It's off?" he asked. "Sprinklers are off," the man confirmed. "Like we talked about. In and out, nobody sees me. Nobody hears anything until morning." Daniel went down into the cellar and carried out 4 crates of the real vintage bottles. The Barolo his father had bought a case of every single anniversary for 2 decades. Bottles with a handwritten year on the cork, and replaced them on the shelves with cheap lookalikes he'd ordered online that week. Same label, same shape, a third of the value. Insurance doesn't ask where the good wine went if no one thinks to look for it in the first place. At 9:40 p.m., he made one final call to his broker, keeping his voice deliberately light, almost bored. "Just confirming the fire rider's active," he said. "Since the reopening, wanted everything buttoned up before the press comes through." The broker told him yes. Effective Monday, no issues at all. Congratulations on the relaunch. Daniel thanked him, hung up, and stepped outside to wait for the cameras, already rehearsing the shocked expression he would need in about 90 minutes, practicing it once in the dark reflection of the restaurant's own front window. Days earlier, 4 days before that, Daniel had sat across from a man named Reyes in a diner 2 towns over, a man who didn't advertise what he did, but whom everyone in this particular business eventually found through a friend of a friend. "Faulty wiring," Reyes had said, stirring his coffee without looking up. "Nobody asks hard questions about faulty wiring in a building this old. It's practically expected in a place with a kitchen that age." Daniel paid him in cash he didn't have, pulled from a business account already 3 withdrawals from empty, because Rossi Foods had sent their 3rd overdue notice that week, and the bank had started, gently but unmistakably, asking about the mortgage on the building itself. Marchetti's had been failing for 8 months by then, ever since a scathing health inspection report leaked online out of nowhere. Rats! the Post said, in a kitchen that hadn't failed an inspection in 30 years. Daniel told himself it was bad luck, a fluke, the internet being cruel, the way the internet is always cruel to somebody eventually. He hadn't yet learned to ask who benefits when luck turns that specific, that perfectly timed, that publicly humiliating on a Friday night before dinner service. He signed the fire insurance rider that same week. No crime yet, no law broken, just a quiet increase in the payout on a building he had already, privately, decided would not survive the month regardless of what he did next. Weeks earlier, 6 weeks before that, Elena Voss had sat in Daniel's dining room as an ordinary guest, or so he believed, not a rival, not a threat. Just the daughter of the family that had co-signed his father's original loan decades ago, back when the two families still exchanged holiday cards. What Daniel didn't know was that Elena had spent the last 2 years quietly buying up the leases on either side of Marchetti's, waiting patiently for the whole block to come cheap, the way a woman waits for fruit to fall rather than climbing for it herself. It was Elena's cousin, a contractor with the county health department, who had discovered droppings that never should have been there. It was an associate of hers who leaked the inspection photos to 3 local food blogs within the same afternoon, timed to land right before the weekend rush. She never lit a match. She never needed to. She only needed Daniel desperate enough to reach for one himself, and desperate men reach for whatever's closest to hand. Daniel never learned Elena's name belonged anywhere near any of it. He only knew the restaurant was dying, and that dying restaurants have a way of taking their owners down with them. So when Reyes's number came from a bartender who knew a guy, Daniel took it gratefully, as a lifeline, never once suspecting it was the last rung of somebody else's ladder. The beginning. 31 years earlier, Daniel's father had opened Marchetti's on a loan from the Voss family. Back when the two families were, if not friends, at least useful enough to each other to shake hands over dinner and mean it. He had told Daniel more than once, always after a second glass of wine, always with the same weight in his voice, never let another man's money decide what kind of man you become. Daniel had grown up believing it completely. He kept that promise for 3 decades, through 2 recessions and 1 divorce, right up until the week he took cash from a stranger to burn down the only thing his father had ever built clean. The investigator who arrested him that night, the one who noticed the missing soot, the 2 clean shoes, was named Marine, and everyone at the department also knew her half-brother by sight, a quiet, unremarkable health inspector named Cruz Voss, Elena's cousin. The very report that started all of it had crossed his desk first, months before anyone thought to ask who'd asked him to look. The restaurant Daniel's father built to prove he owed no man anything burned to the ground. In the end, over a debt Daniel never even knew he had.